Well, welcome back, and hello, boys and girls. It is time for week number 3 of our 2023 NFL team previews here on bet.NOLA.com, powered by the Dattitude Podcast. I am your host, Jim Derry, and it is time for the Denver Broncos. Sean Payton, not just loved here in New Orleans. Well, maybe he's not loved as much as he was, let's say a year and a half, 2 years ago, but still loved by most people nonetheless. What do we think about the Broncos? Is Sean Payton going to be able to revive Russell Wilson's career? Are these Broncos going to be able to turn back into that regular winning powerhouse that we used to know and love? Well, maybe not love, but know at least. They used to win a lot. They haven't won a lot lately. What do we think? Find out. Coming up next. Okay, before we talk about the Broncos of 2023 and what we think, this is a team you absolutely have to talk about 2022 and what happened for them. You can blame it on Nathaniel Hackett. You can blame it on Russell Wilson. You can blame it on the injuries at key spots. Blame it on whatever you want. But as big as Sean Payton's ego is, he was right. They were terrible last year. Everything that could go wrong went wrong. In fact, this team really, if you look at the last 3 games of the year and they just quit, it started with that, 51-14 loss to the lowly at the time Los Angeles Rams, who had nothing to play for. What was that? Especially from a team that had the 7th best defense in the NFL. Well, none of us know what that was. The difference. Sean Payton changes the game for these Denver Broncos, and not just because he's not Nathaniel Hackett, which obviously we know he isn't. Not just because he says he's not Nathaniel Hackett, but this team needed a big change at the top. John Elway has been wanting this for a long time, and they got it. The question is he going to make that much of a difference? Well, I want to look back when you talk about Sean Payton and you think about what happened in his previous gig. Now, granted, he was a lot younger man back then. Is he going to be that same kind of coach? I don't think any of us are sure yet. But you go back to 2006 when he took over the New Orleans Saints, a moribund franchise that had just one playoff victory in its entire franchise history. One playoff victory when he got there in 2006. And in 2005 was one of the worst seasons ever in franchise history. They had to play all their games away from the Superdome because of what Hurricane Katrina had done to the Dome. And so what did he do? They had to fire Jim Haslett, who the owners and top brass were loyal to. They still had to fire Jim Haslett because you can't go 3-13 and not fire your coach. They did that. They bring in Sean Payton, a young at the time Sean Payton, and all he did was take this team not only to another playoff victory, but to the NFC Championship game. So the whole franchise of New Orleans Saints have been changed. Now, he's not going to change the Denver Broncos franchise. They've already been winners. They've won Super Bowls. They've done it for John. They've done it for Peyton. Super Bowl 50. But the fact is that since that Super Bowl 50 victory, they haven't been very good. They've won. In fact, they've only had one winning season since then, and that was the next year. So they've gone 5 years now without a winning season. That's got to change for this franchise. They have to do it with a quarterback in Russell Wilson, who has obviously been on the downside for the past 2 years. It's obvious. And it's not just because his offensive line has been, let's say, a little bit weak. He didn't have a great running game last year. You look at the numbers that are on the screen and the offensive rankings. Now, look, I don't think they tell the whole tale. If you look at the 19th ranked passing game, the 21st ranked rushing game, 21st overall, I don't think that tells the story. I think really this team was way worse than that. And they went into a season where they didn't have a whole ton of draft picks. Their first pick in the draft was the 63rd overall, the second round. They picked wide receiver Marvin Mims out of Oklahoma. I think they got a great pick with linebacker Drew Sanders, who could come in and start from Arkansas in the third round. But really, where they added, and they had to add a ton, and they did most of their work in free agency. All 3 of those names you see, in fact, this is the first team, and it may end up being the only team when you see key additions. There are key additions. The top 3 key additions, in my opinion, are all from free agency, none from the draft. Right tackle Mike McGlinchey from San Francisco, 5 years, $87.5 million right away. Going to be something that Russell Wilson needs. McGlinchey is going to be a stalwart on this offensive line for the next 5 years. On the also on that same right side, guard Ben Powers, whom they got from the Ravens, he signs a deal, 4 years, $51.5 million. So that whole right side of the line is revamped for Russell Wilson. On the defensive side of the football, sure, they lost a key player in Draymond Jones. There's no question about it. He led the team last year in quarterback hits. He led the team last year in quarterback sacks, 10 and 6.5, I think, respectively. So they went from being a 5th-ranked defense to a 7th-ranked defense in the last 3 games of the year. I think they had 12 games where they allowed 20 points, fewer than 20 points. Can they do that again? I don't know. They've improved. So they do get a younger defensive end in Zach Allen from Arizona, 25 years old, sign him to a 3-year, $47.75 million deal. Is he going to be able to fill the shoes of Draymond Jones? I don't know, but with all that they've added, I'm not sure that he has to be that good. But at 25 years old, much younger, probably a little bit more athletic. They also get Frank Clark from their hated rivals, the Kansas City Chiefs. That's going to be interesting. Sean Payton on the offensive side of the ball brought over Marquez Callaway, wide receiver on a 1-year deal. And by the way, while we're here, what's the deal with his love for Adam Troutman? Makes a trade for Adam Troutman. I don't quite get it, but anyway, they got another tight end that they can use. We'll see if it matters or not. All right, what needs to go right for this team to be back in the mix of the playoffs? If you're asking for this team to win the AFC West and be a Super Bowl contender, then just about every single move Peyton and company has made this offseason, again, there were tons of them, they have to go right. Oh, and Russell Wilson needs to be the old Russell Wilson. The young Russell Wilson. Whatever. You know what I'm talking about. I don't know, man. Let's look at the schedule before we start talking any more about our predictions. We talked about it earlier and how that Sean Payton was able to revitalize the 2006 Saints and change that franchise, and he did it in such a short period of time. And we forget there were a bunch of 7-9 seasons along the way throughout a 16-year career in New Orleans. But this team, this schedule, they were 5-12 last season, 4th in the division, obviously. Again, you kind of write off the last 3 games of the year. So if you want to call them 5-9, fine. They just gave up those last 3 games, whatever. But this is the 11th toughest schedule. It doesn't start that way, though. Las Vegas, Washington, at Miami, at Chicago. That sets up for this Broncos to get some momentum going early on. Easily could be a 3-1 kind of start. Then you got the Jets. You got at Kansas City. You got Green Bay, who's going to be much improved. Green Bay stinks. No, they don't stink. They're going to be okay. And then Kansas City again. So you got Kansas City twice in a 3-week span before that bye week. And it doesn't get any easier. You come off the bye week, you go to Buffalo on a Monday night. You're home for Minnesota. You're home for Cleveland. And then you go on a 3-game road trip before finish the season at home, 2 out of 3, New England, the Chargers, and at Vegas in the last week of the season. If Russell Wilson stinks it up, what do? They brought in Jarrett Stidham. Is Jarrett Stidham going to be the next quarterback? Do they give up on Russell Wilson? Lots of questions. Drum roll, please. It's time for predictions. I think you know which way I'm headed. A mediocre team. I got them as an 8-win team right now. But that being said, I don't love the under. I got it on here as a best bet. I honestly wouldn't touch it. This easily could be a 7-win team. It could be an 8-win team. It could be a 9-win team. I think it's one of those 3 numbers. I think they win 7, 8, or 9 games. I'd be surprised if it was 6 or fewer. I'd be surprised if it were 10 or more. For that reason, my best bet really is, and I don't normally advocate a minus 210. I'm not in love with -2 anything, or certainly more than that, more times than not. In this case, minus 210, not to make the playoffs. I'm going to tell you why. Because I think at least 2 teams are coming out of the AFC East, possibly 3. I think at least 2 teams are coming out of the AFC North. If you don't get 3 out of the East, I think you're going to get 3 out of the North. And I think you're going to get 2 out of the AFC West. I think you know which 2 I'm talking about. So how are the Broncos going to creep in there? I think it's a minimum You got to win a minimum of 10 games to get in the playoffs. Too many ifs, too many whats. I like the -10 to miss the playoffs. We'll find out if I'm right. I might feel differently about tomorrow's team because tomorrow we're going to have the defending Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs. They're probably going to be pretty good again, even though I don't want to give any spoiler alerts. We'll see you tomorrow.